All right, we are go for launch.
Good evening and welcome to the April 26, 2023 Henrietta Town Board meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please call the roll.
I had to adjust some settings on my end. I am here. Councilmember Safranek,
Here.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Here.
Councilmember Page,
Here.
Councilmember Belanca,
Here.
Supervisor Schultz.
Here. We'll begin the meeting with a silent prayer followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Supervisor Schultz and fellow board members, I make a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of April 13th, 2023.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. First up, we have special use permit application number 2023-014. Gerald and Teresa Sire. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. 58 Campfire Road South. They have 5 dogs. Sorry, Jesse. All right, thanks. Could you come up to the microphone, introduce yourself and tell us what you're interested in?
My name's Gerald Sire and I'm asking for a special permit for my 5 dogs. One weighs 6 pounds, one weighs 18 pounds, 2 at 40 and 1 at 60. And one was a rescue dog for my mother-in-law. She died from pancreatic cancer. That was a Chihuahua. And the other dog was getting beaten on, which my stepdaughter brought home. But they've been with me for a couple of years. And they're all licensed and vaccinated. And I got visible fence around my house. Plus, I've been a resident since 1964 of Henrietta.
Sir, did you say you had a fence around your house?
Invisible fence, yes.
Oh, invisible. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. My house backs up the woods. Campfire runs parallel to Pinnacle Road. And 2 larger dogs are elderly. So,
Would you have, if we granted this, would you have an issue if it was just essentially while these dogs
yeah,
lives?
I'm not planning on getting any more. I wasn't planning on
Right.
having this many.
Right.
So, I'll be 62 years old this year. I'm not planning on staying another 15 years around this world. So,
Have there been any issues with neighbors, with the dogs bothering any of the neighbors or anything like that that you're
No.
aware of?
no. My neighbor across the street, he got a dog. The neighbor next door's got a dog. My next door neighbor's got a dog. 7 o'clock in the morning, you hear the neighbor's dog barking next door. It's a bigger dog, about this size.
So generally speaking, your dogs are well behaved and
Yeah,
don't annoy the neighbors with a lot of barking and that sort of thing.
no. I let them out 6:30 in the morning before I go to work, bring them back in, put them back in bed with my wife.
So there's not a doggy door, you have to let them in and out?
Yeah,
Okay.
of course, I can't put screens on the door because they scratch at the door to come in.
Yeah, some like my house has a doggy door, so my dog can go in and out of the backyard whenever.
I would
needs.
worry about a rodent coming in too.
Yeah.
That's true.
Other questions?
So, are you able to keep up with the
the yard maintenance of the dogs? Because, you know, you gotta clean up after them every so often.
Yeah,
Is that
I- Clean up I take care of the yard maintenance,
Mm-hmm,
and in the winter time,
Greater than 3
I do it in
meters.
the spring when the,
yeah,
snow's
when the
gone.
snow melts. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's good fertilizer too. You can see where the grass is growing good.
So we do have a resident comment. I don't know if you saw that, Steve.
I did.
Stating that somebody who's going to be anonymous said that the dogs are often barking late into the evening. And they're just asking that you keep the dog barking to a minimum and keep the dogs indoors during quiet hours. So I don't know what, this is just an anonymous from somebody, so I don't even know. I just want to
Yeah.
bring it to your attention.
Yeah, I don't let them out after 11 o'clock, but I've heard about that, so I tell, the other people in my house,
Okay,
don't let them out after 11.
okay, perfect.
This is a little bit of a difficult situation. If you had 3 dogs right now, which is legal or allowable, and you ask us to have 2 more for 5, I would vote no. But the fact that you've had these dogs for a couple of years would lend me to think that approving it with stipulations might be the best way to go, which would include, you already have the fence,
Yeah,
and you already agreed that once the 2 of the dogs pass, that you would continue to keep 3 or more, or less. You wouldn't.
or less than that.
Yeah, 3 or fewer, you meant, yeah.
Like I said, if I ever pass away, I
Yeah,
don't know who would take him, and I want to go to a good home, which I can't see that happening.
but I would also like to add the stipulation that if we continue, not that we've had, but if for some reason we were continuing to get complaints, or we learned that maybe somebody got bit or something, then we may have to readdress it.
Yeah.
Maybe the permit would have to be removed. Is that fair to
Okay.
you? Does that seem fair to you?
Yeah.
Okay,
I don't know how we add that. So I was gonna add that this permit expires when any 2 of the 5 dogs have passed.
Yeah, I would also add in there that they're required to comply with the noise code.
Why did you tell the dog license place when they pass, though?
Pardon?
Did you tell the dog license place when they pass?
Yeah, typically what happens is when they call for renewal, sometimes the owners notify us. Often what happens is when we send out the renewal notice for dog license, we get notified that they've passed.
Okay,
But
yeah, I lost my favorite dog, and, before I acquired another one. Melanoma cancer. My favorite dog too.
When the dogs are outside, do you keep water and things like that out there
Yep.
for them so they have access to all that?
5 gallons.
Okay, great.
I don't know how we address what Rick had brought up with regards to biting. Oh,
Yeah, you said barking.
Can we say something along the lines, dogs shall continue to be well behaved?
About the fence.
There's a-
Well, he's got an
He has
invisible
an
fence.
invisible.
so we'll
fence?
just have condition upon the continued use of upon meeting noise code. Continued.
Kept within,
uh,
continue to be kept within the fenced in area.
Confine. Yard. Through. Fence
Visible fence goes 15 feet away from the road.
visible. Or otherwise. I don't know. I don't know, Rick, that typically if a dog bites a person, that it's often required to be put down, so I guess in
okay.
theory I
I just
don't know
meant-
how else to word it. No, I understand. I just don't know how else to word
Could
it.
we just say, adhering to what the current code is, because the current code is also that it can't be outside barking for longer than X amount.
That one we have in there, yeah.
Right, yeah. So as
right.
far as biting, if it bites it, that's an issue too, which is already covered under the code,
Right,
correct?
Okay,
I think usually the person
Isn't
that's,
it the code up past 11 o'clock, they can't be out barking, right?
I think it might be 10, but I could be wrong on that.
Yeah. I just think the concern is that, if they go out real quick and come back.
Yeah.
in. But we all know that sometimes they don't oblige us by being really quick with what they
Yeah,
they need to do.
they don't like the rain.
Right, they don't like the rain. They're fair weather dogs, huh?
No, there is something under dogs. I think there's a section of code.
Well, I guess,
I'm trying to pull up the section of isn't there a section of code on dogs?
I believe so. There's also state law that deals with.
He's talking about the time frame for barking.
Oh, okay.
Well, and just, rather than just say, I'm gonna say noise. I want to say the dog code and then essentially and other applicable.
Chapter 79 is about dog licenses.
So,
Also talks about dangerous dog.
okay.
Okay.
So I will say. So
And it talks about parking.
chapter 79,
Do the dogs all get along?
Oh, yeah.
okay,
That's half the battle.
so I'm gonna say continued compliance.
On the $100 fee, is that every year thing or just one time?
Which $100 fee
The $100 fee I gave you guys
for the
permit?
special use permit? That's one time.
Okay,
I wasn't sure if that was the sum of your dog licenses. Although I don't think they're anywhere that high. Okay. Any other questions? Anything from the public? And I'm going to close the public hearing for special use permit application number 2023-014 for 5 dogs. Fellow board members, I make a motion to approve special use permit application number 2023-014 conditioned upon the following. That the special use permit will expire when any 2 of the current 5 dogs have passed,
And which time only 3 dogs can be permitted.
at which time only 3 dogs shall be permitted. That there is continued compliance with chapter 79 of town code and other applicable laws. And that there is continued confinement within the yard through fence, invisible or otherwise.
you know, I tend to go out of the yards with my truck. I'd like to go for rides, you know?
Mhm.
That's a lot. We're
That's
just
fine.
talking about within the yard.
Yeah, when they're hanging out in the yard.
Is there anyone who wishes to second?
Seconded. Take who you want.
I'll let Becky make that decision. Any further discussion? Ed actually already asked for public comment. Yep. Then hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranik,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Well, I'd like to thank you for taking in the dogs that otherwise would, let's be honest, probably be destroyed if they were turned over. So I
Yeah,
appreciate that. And, like I said,
I've never had any children, so these are my family, you know?
there you
Yeah,
go.
we know.
You don't come home looking for money, they just come home greeting you. with
That's
them.
right.
That's right.
Thank you. You have a good night.
Yep.
You too,
Have a
thank you.
good-
Next up, we have special use permit application number 2023-015 JBC Rice Noodles and Ramen, 900 Jefferson Road, Building 9, to operate a restaurant serving Asian cuisine with sit-down and takeout meal service and to allow alcohol to be sold.
Yes, Jason Pierce.
You want to just tell us a little bit about your proposal?
I'm here on behalf of Mark Tang, who's a local restaurateur. He's got a couple places, including Revolution Chinese in Henrietta. This will be a new concept for Henrietta and Rochester. This is primarily a Chinese noodle concept. It's a franchise from New York City. This will be one of the first couple that are outside of the city. And I think it'll bring something new, unique to the culinary scene.
I know my deputy town supervisor will be excited at many a meeting where developers are talking about what kind of restaurant should I go after? He's always saying, how about a noodle bar? So,
Well, my kids love ramen too.
yeah,
Yeah,
This-
we were the first to bring ramen to Rochester with Furoshiki on Park Ave, which has been very successful.
great. You have a question or comment?
No, I was just a little disappointed you didn't bring samples.
That's
Yeah. Well, we don't have a kitchen yet, but
No,
Yeah.
that's okay.
I don't have a whole lot of questions. Where are you like in relation to like Blue Toad?
Blue Toad is in the building that the facade looks like a street facade.
Right.
They're all the way to the right, we're all the way to the left.
Gotcha.
So you're in the same building though?
Essentially, yes.
Okay, thank you.
It's a great location,
It is a good location.
We're excited.
especially
Mhm.
since Blue Toad doesn't have food, so,
No, that's
Correct,
right.
yeah. We already went down and introduced myself.
yeah. But I know they let you bring food in, so that's awesome.
Yep.
Mhm.
I don't have any other questions. Are there any questions?
No,
from you guys? Any questions from the public?
Did you put your hours of operation on here? I'm sorry, I didn't see.
It'll be lunch and dinner, so I would expect 11 to 9.
Will there be outdoor seating?
There isn't really much space for outdoor seating. If there is, it'd be very, very little.
Very limited.
Yeah.
And
I was just looking what's checked on the boxes.
yeah, any not that it really matters. Is there any events or anything like that that you plan on having there, music at night or anything?
No, pretty cut and dried, delivery, pickup and dine in.
Okay. All right, fantastic. I think I'm good.
I'm sorry.
What is your anticipated time to receive the alcohol permit, your license?
Well, that is up to the state. The state
I know that,
SLA, I think they're running about 8 months.
8 months?
these days.
Thank you.
Yeah. But that won't keep us from.
No, I understand. That was related to another application.
Yeah, and it's pretty varied. I mean, you can apply for a temporary, which does speed it up a little bit. But it's taking a long time these days.
Okay, thank you.
when are you thinking of opening? How quickly do you think you can get this together? Did you say that?
Well, Mark's flying back from Hong Kong as we speak. We'll meet with the contractor as soon as he gets back, 2 or 3 days, and once we get started, it'll go fast.
Okay.
Sounds good. Feel free to reach out to me at supervisor@henrietta.org. I can put you in touch with the Chamber of Commerce, although the president of the chambers, Brendan, at the market. so-
Oh, great, yeah.
But that way we can do a ribbon cutting, hopefully get you some initial publicity, maybe
That'd be fantastic. We just did that with a place up in Arundequoit, and it went really well.
great. Any other questions?
Nope.
And hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing for special use permit application number 2023-015. Anyone wish to make a motion?
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I move that we approve special use permit application number 2023-015. JBC Rice Noodles and Ramen, 900 Jefferson Road, Building 9, to operate a restaurant serving Asian cuisine with sit-down and takeout meal service and to allow alcohol to be sold.
Second,
Any further discussion? And hearing none, please call the roll.
Council members Safranik,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
aye.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
All right. Congratulations, and we look forward to having you open.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Next up, we have a public hearing for special use permit applications number 2023 012 and 013 for East River Henrietta LLC. The project was formerly known as Lehigh Mixed Use. It's for 84, 85, and 135 Lehigh Station Road to modify a previously approved mixed-use development comprised of commercial, industrial, multifamily residential, and civic space to now include attached single-family residential, which is application 2023-12, and to construct a 236 plus or minus 236 single-family attached dwellings, which is application 2023-013.
Good evening, Mr. Supervisor, members of the board. My name is Jess Sudol, civil engineer with Pastoro Associates. Here with me this evening is Mr. Brian McKinnon, representing the applicant, which is East River Road Henrietta LLC. I apologize if I go a little quickly here, but I made a commitment to pick up my 12-year-old based on the agenda. So she'll be waiting on the sidewalk outside her school.
Sorry about that. You should have let me know. I could have.
No, it's fine.
The gentleman was also had a time commitment.
Yeah, I knew they were going to be pretty quick, so it's no big deal. So anyway, this is a property that is on the northeast and southeast corner of Lehigh Station Road and East River Road. It was originally proposed and approved to be entirely residential going all the way back to 2019. Shortly thereafter, there was a moratorium issued by the town on multifamily housing. During the process of the moratorium, the town implemented several different mixed-use districts, this site being one of the sites that's located within the mixed-use employment center district. Shortly after that happened, our office appeared before you to essentially move forward a special use permit that would have residential on the north side of Lehigh Station Road, which actually was eventually approved, received special use permit, and is now under construction. And then approximately 600,000 square feet of industrial space on the south end of the road, which is approximately 80 acres. Since then, the applicant owner has been actively marketing that site and trying to bring in industrial users to develop it, while they're holding the land. Unfortunately, just for a number of different circumstances, whether that be existing space that's already available or sites that, might have slightly better infrastructure or be more shovel ready, there hasn't been a tremendous amount of interest, although there has been some, and we're hopeful portions of the site will eventually be developed in that manner. But what has developed is an interest to build single family homes or attached single family homes, and we also refer to them as townhomes on this site. The town has certainly seen its fair share of multifamily residential or apartments, all in different areas of town. But, there isn't a whole heck of a lot of attached single family homes. And what's nice about that concept, and these would all be for sale, just like a normal single family home on a lot would be. By doing them attached, we can lower the price point to a point that's much more affordable. Anyone who's tried to build a new home now, you're talking about $350,000, $400,000, $500,000, but these would actually start in the 200. So we'd be bringing forward a for sale project at a much more affordable price. And there's not a whole lot of that development around. So we're really excited about it and certainly very confident in that demand. So as you see on the computer screen here, or some of our application materials, the layout where we do have a number of different buildings, anywhere from 2 to 3 or 4 units per building, totaling 236 in total. That, of course, is different than the special use permit that was previously granted, which is why we've entered this process. One of the things that all of the mixed use overlay districts have is different limits, both ceilings and floors, on the different types of uses that could be put in these districts. So it has to be X amount of space of industrial. There's a cap on the amount of residential. There's also a requirement for civic space, et cetera. So one of the things that we've done, and one of the things I also want to point out, is since we originally submitted our application, we have revisited some of those allocations of space, as I mentioned at the workshop on Monday. Essentially what we did that was different. So first of all, nothing in the proposal or the plan has changed. But what we have done is we've identified what we call unusable space that's removed from the calculation, has been really limited to those areas that are truly defined as unusable by the town code, most notably the wetlands, steep slopes, the cultural resource area. So the application materials that you have now reflect that change. And As a result, or the resulting density of the residential for the entire mixed use area is approximately 10 units per acre. I also want to point out, as you can see on the plan there, which is similar to the one that's over here on the whatever you call that thing again, is we are planning to continue to have the 30% required industrial space that would be on the west side of the creek. For those of you familiar with this parcel, the creek, or the southern side of the site, which we're speaking about this evening, is bisected by a creek that runs from south to north, and we're talking about developing the east side of that creek. One of the things that we did when we started to put together this proposal and explore it for Brian and his group was, of course, go back to the seeker determination that was made in 2021 and look at those areas of impact and compare them to the potential impact that would arise from 236 townhomes. On Monday, I provided, and I still have for reference if anybody needs it, just a little analysis we did where we looked at traffic, parking spaces, loading docks, truck trips, things like green space, total building square footage, lighting, all the items that you would normally consider under seeker. And in each case, and there it is there, you can see that the impact associated from the townhomes or the, for sale units is less than what was considered in terms of environmental impact under the 2021 special use permit. So we just wanted to make sure that we weren't providing impact that would be anything more than what was previously considered. I will also say, people that have been on this board for a while are, of course, familiar with the East River Road. I don't know if it's transportation district or how.
Seeker mitigation.
Yeah, seeker mitigation. So, this project would be subject to that seeker mitigation fee, whereas any trip that comes to our site or leaves our site via East River Road, north or south, would be required to pay the mitigation fee. So that doesn't change from any of the previous approvals. We're still subject to that. So that's the proposal. And again, we really are excited about it. We think it's a need, not just in the town of Henrietta, but quite frankly, across all of Monroe County, for a affordable for sale component. One of the things I did want to point out that was brought up at Monday's workshop is there was a question on whether or not there would be bedrooms on the first floor. The base, anyone familiar with, some of these larger home builders, there's kind of the base price and the base model, and then you can upgrade from there, and you can spend anywhere from $250,000 to $375,000 if that's your budget and you want 42-inch cabinets and granite countertops and everything. But as part of that upgrade package, there is also an option to add that bedroom on the first floor, which just makes the unit a little bit deeper. And that will, of course, be based on the demand. So with that said, we know that, the board's not necessarily going to act tonight, but we did want to, present a proposal. If we were to move forward, of course, we would still have site plan, subdivision approval and things like that to go through.
Right. So, a couple just quick comments, and you've heard some of these Monday, repeat them now, especially since your client is here to hear some of it. When I look at the site plan for the north and I look at the site plan for the south, there's a lot more green space around there. And I know this meets the code, but it just looks dense when I look at the townhomes. And, as we discussed, I'd like to take a look at, is there a way to either eliminate, just a couple of the buildings to get more space between the buildings? One of the other possibilities, I don't know if 4 is some magic number. Could you put, well, I guess according to multiplication rock, 3 is a magic number, but if you could combine 2 of the, like if you put 2 of the buildings together and had 8 units, that would double the size of the span between each building.
Sure.
Look at things like that just to try to decrease that packed in look. The other thing, in talking with residents, it actually came up at an event recently. And there's definitely some interest in this from a senior standpoint, which again, someone had already brought some of that up Monday, which goes back to the first floor bedrooms. But what you're requesting is above the threshold. So one of the things from a procedural standpoint, we will have to coordinate with the planning board so we can exceed those numbers. But procedurally, we have to get the planning board to sign off on the additional density as well before we approve it. One of the other avenues is through incentive zoning. You know, one of the things that we've heard from a lot of residents is, I'm looking for a place to downsize, and with today's real estate market, prices are going through the roof, and nobody seems to be building the smaller homes that are either, you know, I'll call them empty nesters, whether that's empty because they haven't had their kids yet, so a starter home, or whether it's empty nest because their kids have all grown up and moved away. And so, you know, one of the things to look at when you're taking a look at this and seeing what you can do to decrease that dense packedness is, if some of these were perhaps, instead of 1,800 square feet, more like 1,200 square feet, you know, and had the first floor bedroom, that then creates some opportunity for some more affordable space. I'm not talking all of them. It could be potentially a mix, that type of stuff. But like I said, I know that there is definitely some interest out there for some smaller, more affordable homes. And, you know, I know there's a lot of people who would like, I believe you were talking that this would be like an HOA to deal with the yards and stuff like
Correct.
that.
Yep.
Which again, for a lot of people, they are interested in no longer having to mow. So, you know, that's something to consider and to take a look at. But, you know, again, as we talked about, we won't be acting at this meeting. So that we'll keep this public hearing open through the next meeting, but that's something to take a look at when you're revisiting.
Sure. Thank you.
Other comments that I know, like I said, I know we talked about some of this at Monday's meeting, but we have the developer here.
Yes, I was also not here for that
Yep.
part of the presentation.
And I do know one of the things with what Supervisor Schultz had suggested was to put two of the buildings together. I do know, again, with my real estate perspective, that N units are much more desirable than center units. So I'm certain that that's probably something that would be, I mean, you just know people want the N units. They only want one neighbor. They don't want us to be squished between two. So I do
Okay.
understand that. But I'm thrilled to hear that you are going to have a first floor bedroom possibility there, because I think that's really, really important, what's going on in the real estate market today. So
Jess, if my memory serves me correctly, there is going to be a second entrance to East River, Erie Station or East River Road.
Yes, sir. There will
Okay.
be an entrance that extends from the project directly to the west until it meets East River Road, right across the street from the existing
Yeah.
access over there, where there's an existing
So
light.
the
So,
fire marshal's always like a second means of egress. So that fits there.
yeah, like
With-
is saying it lightly.
Just curiosity, nothing to do with the permit. With 236 units, where do you get the 269 parking spots?
Well, there's set surface spaces, so there's at least one per unit, and then we provide overflow parking spaces, 3 here, 4 there.
Oh,
For
okay.
people visitors, so we don't have.
That's just
parking in
in
the
show.
street.
Okay, okay.
And then there's also, in addition, they have garages.
And there's
correct?
so there's one in the garage, one in the driveway, and then additional overflow for visitors sprinkled throughout.
Yep, standard mile. Okay.
these are one car units, one car garage units.
Yes.
Yes.
So is this still considered a mixed use development, or are you looking?
It
at
is. That's what this portion over here is the commercial. This is the civic. That's the rental apartments, and that's the for sale townhomes, which isn't allowed use in the mixed use employment center overlay. So it's allowed if they're attached homes. In single family individual homes is not an allowed use within the mix, but row houses or townhouses is.
For your traffic study data, where were you pulling that data from? Was that from the original study that you did in 2020?
Well, the data, I think the relevant data that we used for the comparison was based on projections. You know, what's projected for 300,000 square foot of industrial versus what is projected for 236 units. And that's how we would analyze the projected impact. And that comes from the Institution of Transportation Engineers standard publications, which is how every traffic study is done. In terms of the traffic study itself and analyzing potential impact, that data has been collected over time. I did it first in 2018, again, 2021. 2021 wasn't the best time to take traffic data because of COVID. There have been all kinds of adjustment factors that has been basically published by the industry to take that into consideration. And then on top of that, because traffic levels have returned to what is going to be considered normal now, we still go out and recalibrate today.
So the difference, the delta, that there's something called trip generations based off of the type of use. And again, it's collected over a ton of data across a lot of stuff, you know, these projects.
Right. And the trip generations that we use, a lot of that data was derived prior to COVID. So that probably is conservative and might even overestimate it a bit because it doesn't take into account the amount of work from home that there is today.
Mhm.
So it's conservative if anything.
But there was a previous traffic impact study that was part of the original application,
Correct.
if I remember. And so when we were looking at this, we weren't looking to necessarily have them update it. We wanted them to run the trip generations to see what the relative trip generations were between the townhome uses versus what would have been there were two commercial, or excuse me, industrial buildings. The nature of that changes a little bit because it essentially the traffic's reversed, right? When people are living there. Now, again, this is assuming it's not a lot of senior. One of the nice things about the other advantage, why we'd be willing, well, at least I can't speak for the board, why I'd be willing to approve something with the increased density if there was a number of these that were geared towards seniors. Seniors naturally tend not to travel at the busiest times because they, now obviously if they've got an appointment or something like that, but if they're free to go out at any time, they typically tend to pick times that aren't as busy. If you're looking at people who are going out to the workforce, if you think about this use is essentially reversed from the commercial or industrial use, because here the majority of the traffic is leaving in the morning peak time and returning in the afternoon peak time, whereas for the industrial traffic, it's reversed. So if you look at from a congested standpoint, it's arguably, so it adds to the potential congestion for the northern, in other words, it's essentially additive to the apartments, but it is I'll call it subtractive or complementary to the commercial use next door, because again, if they're not all trying to come into the site.
Well, we certainly hear your comments loud and clear. We'll, get together and talk about some different options on how we could accomplish that and share that with the board.
Thank you.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Thank
you.
you. Go get your son.
They do have to. Yeah, oh yeah, he knows it. Okay. Yeah. They had to pay for the question was whether they had to pay seeker mitigation fees, and yes, they're well aware of that. They had to pay it for the top portion. Basically, as each phase gets built, they have to pay the fees for that phase. Normally what happens in this, in terms of the portions that's not being developed, it's not supposed to be cleared and disturbed and that type of stuff. Obviously for that connection road that goes out to East River Road, that'd be an exception because that road's being built as part of this phase, even though it's passing through the area that's in the commercial area.
Right.
So that corridor and what's on either side would be left.
Get your son.
You can go ahead.
Go get your son.
It's even worse.
Get your child. How's that? Okay, so do we have the developer still here?
Yes.
Yep, okay. Is there any input from the public who wants to provide additional feedback on this proposal? Oh, we've got the developer here to hear it.
I do have a question online.
Okay,
The question is, do the traffic studies include the apartment buildings under construction to the north? Opposite the H, but that we know what apartment that.
yeah,
apartment is.
so yes, it included all the stuff that was in under construction at the time or even at proposed. So if you look at the original traffic impact study, There was the current conditions, the future conditions and future conditions with the build out of this particular property. So at that time, both these apartments and the apartments in what was the former Larkin parcel was Rock River, I think it's now the Marshall. Those were included in the the study in regards to that. And again, the county is undertaking, has been working on the designs for some time to make significant improvements to East River Road to better deal with the congestion that has occurred there. And so one of the things that we did is rather than put a portion of that cost onto the taxpayer, we created a seeker mitigation corridor so that the developers who are essentially adding congestion to the area help contribute to that mitigation fund, which will alleviate the issues created by the additional traffic. So it includes, like in some areas, especially where there's a lot of driveways, they're going to add a center turning lane. They're lengthening the turn lanes at the intersections. If you look, there's that entrance that goes, the two entrances that go into the Riverwood Tech Campus. It's the former Kodak facility. They were not aligned with streets. And so there was this weird offset from Lehigh Station Road. That's going to be straightened up. So the intersection at Lehigh Station Road will become a 4-way intersection, and that northern entrance into Riverwood will be eliminated. They are, again, we'll be improving the light signals, the sensor loops. In addition, we had obtained a multimodal grant through Assemblymember Bronson's office, as well as a state aid to municipalities grant through Senator Gallivan's office. And so we're going, at the same time they're doing the road improvements, we're going to be doing some significant improvements to the pedestrian and bicycling. There'll be a path similar to what's on John Street on the RIT campus. It's essentially the width of more or less a 1-lane road. But that way, for people walking, biking, for me, it used to be rollerblading on that path. We're going to take that from the southwest entrance of RIT all the way down to Lehigh Station Road. Now, one of the other things that we've done for these developers, for these mixed use developments, they have to include civic space. So one of the things we offered them is that if they basically worked with them, is to include that trail system to extend it in their projects. It was especially important for both of these, because there were things that that trail had to get around. So for this one, you'll see there's a large wetlands that wouldn't allow us to keep the sidewalk trail right along the edge of the road. So when it gets across from Fairwood, it's going to actually come in, go around the wetlands, and then come back out to the intersection of Lehigh Station. And again, that cost to build that's being borne by the developer, not by taxpayers. And then the project to the north, we had to get the path around the historic cemetery that's located there. And so again, same thing, the developer is bringing that trail around there. And so they will be connecting the two. And what that means, so when I first took office, there was a student who was hit by a truck. Now, I think they were hit by the actual side view mirrors. It was a box panel truck with the big mirrors. The individual was deaf or hard of hearing. Unfortunately, was wearing dark clothing. The driver didn't see them. They were walking the wrong way in traffic, but they were walking in the shoulder because there are no sidewalks there. And that the mirror hit him in the back of the head and nearly killed him. Thankfully, he survived. So that was the impetus that enabled us to get some of the state funding. Unfortunately, the state is not very quickly with how it does the funding, and the COVID did not help. So it's been a long delay. But like I said, that should be coming. As I've talked about before, that's one of the biggest frustrations I've had coming to government from the private sector, is how much longer it takes to get stuff done, especially when the state or federal government's involved. But the good news, it's in the works. And again, we've been working with these developers who have again agreed to extend essentially almost double the length of that walkway from what the funding from the state is supplying. So I'm very excited about that aspect, because again, I think that's going to help tremendously. Any other questions, comments? Then hearing none, I'm going to.
I'm sorry.
Problem, go ahead.
I wasn't quick enough. Another Q&A. This is from Sue. What about the added congestion at East River Road and Jefferson Road by RIT?
So we have approached the New York State Department of Transportation multiple times. We've suggested the possibility of adding a second left turn lane on the bridge, because I don't know if it's back to how it used to be, but certainly pre-pandemic, when you used to try to go northbound at 4:30-ish, when RIT was letting out, it took multiple cycles of that light to get through that intersection. Unfortunately, we can only ask, beg, cajole. It's the New York State DOT has control of that intersection. The county has reached out to them multiple times. There is a new director from when we started this. You know, maybe he'll be more willing to allow something to happen there, but by all means, contact him. If you search for New York State, so NYS DOT Region 4, you will find the contact list. The director's name is Christopher Reeve. Feel free to call him, email him. I don't know if his email's on there, but if you want it, you can email me and I'll give it to him. Reach out to him, talk to him, contact your assembly member, copy in. If you're going to email him, carbon copy Harry Bronson and Jeremy Cooney, so Patrick Gallivan used to be our state senator. It's now Jeremy Cooney after redistricting. Let's put pressure on New York State DOT to do something. That's probably more frustrating than even just the length of time it takes to get stuff done, because at least with that stuff, you see progress. We don't always see that with the New York State DOT. So I wish I could give you a better answer than that, but that's the reality of the situation. Any other questions? Yep, come on up. And just introduce yourself before you start speaking.
Yeah, I'm Wendy Owens. I've spoken to you. I just graduated from RIT in wetland science. So my concern is about maybe the buffering around the wetlands and the creek when they're doing the construction. And I've seen this over at the houses that my family and I own over near Ward Hill, where some of the construction is causing issues with the hydrology. So my concern is more like, what are the plans to make sure that some of the runoff and the soil sedimentation that might be affecting the stream or the wetlands? So my deputy town supervisor stays on top of that. And if you actually talk to many of the builders, they will tell you Henrietta is actually one of the strictest towns in that regards, which Craig takes great pride in. I will say some builders are better about it than others. And the folks who are involved in these projects tend to be better at it. But he definitely stays on top of it. You know, sometimes the New York State DEC doesn't they do a slap on the wrist when there's a violation. So we report it, they come in. We sometimes wish they would do a stricter result, because I think there are some developers who think, it's the cost of doing business. But
believe me, I've seen a number of projects get shut down because there was a blowout in the silt fence or they didn't properly stabilize or stuff like that. So like I said, Craig Eckert, my deputy town supervisor, he stays on top of that. But like I said, unfortunately, some builders are worse than others. And I will just say that we've had some problems over at Ward Hill.
Yeah. Enough said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Apologies, I missed that speaker's name. Could I get their name? I'm sorry to make you come back.
Wendy Owens. My family and I have property off of Ward Hill, several houses, and off of a long trail off of East Henrietta Road.
Wendy is one of the students, although from the email, did you graduate? Yeah, so she's since graduated, but she was one of the students doing the study on the Cedar Swamp in that area that's going to become part of the future county park. So there's a swamp, Cedar Swamp in there. And one of the things that they've seen is that as the ash trees have been dying off, there's starting to be a resurgence of cedar, and they're studying the resurgence of native vegetation as invasive species have died off. So. Any other questions, comments? Then hearing none, I'm going to close this session of the public hearing for special use permit application number 2023-12 and -13. Again, we will continue the public hearing at the next town board meeting. Next up, we have a public hearing for the proposed local law to address brush, grass, and weeds. Before we open it up for public comments, thank you. Before we open it up for public comments, I would just like to make a couple things because I saw online a lot of incorrect information. Almost everything in here is actually already in the town code. We're putting it together in places. We are also addressing issues from an enforceability standpoint. There were a number of judicial reforms which have affected, I'll call it the efficiency by which we get through the court system. And so one of the things we've been looking at is changing and fixing some of the stuff in our town codes to better align with what the court needs from a discovery standpoint and a prosecution standpoint and a law, code backup standpoint. So in addition, we have increased the amount of allowed exemptions from the requirement. The requirement for the 6-inch lawn was always there. And interestingly enough, it was in theory your entire parcel. And so we've added a bunch of other exemptions for things like conservation easements or steep slopes where it's too tough to mow, wooded areas, wetlands and wetland buffers, and a bunch of things like that. One of the things we've taken a look at, we've had some issues where there have been problems with sight lines, especially people coming out of the driveways and or side roads. And so we wanted to, for those undeveloped lots that people allow to grow, we wanted to keep some of the, we wanted to keep an area near the edge of the road and or around a sidewalk clear so that, like, if someone's riding their bike the kid is riding their bike on the sidewalk and they get to a driveway, there isn't suddenly the kid appears out of nowhere because they've been behind tall grass or brush. One of the things I will apologize. So originally we were doing that from a center line distance, and the right of way, as we were talking about it, I said, nobody knows where the edge of the right of way is. They all know where the edge of the pavement is. So we shifted it to the edge of pavement. I did not adjust the distance. And so there's been some people who've been pushed back and said, wow, boy, 30 feet seems like a lot. It is a lot because it was originally 30 feet from the center line. When you subtract out the typical width of a road, that shortens to 15 feet. So we're not going to be acting on the law tonight because we've made that adjustment. The other stuff that came up through some feedback I've been receiving, we've received a lot of feedback online and via emails. Someone had asked about the ability to get an easement, so I checked with our town attorney. The easements are, this is for the distances and such. The easements are, for lack of a better way to put it, they're kind of default that yes, you can do it for zoning stuff, but for other sections of code it is not by default. So he added a section in code that does allow someone to apply for an easement to reduce that setback if there is some reason. I'm saying easement, sorry. Thank you, Don. Variance. Variances are by default in zoning. Normally you couldn't get a variance here, but we did. He added a section of code that would allow someone to apply for a variance to reduce that setback requirement for the portion that has to be mowed. There was a number of questions with regards to definition of noxious or poisonous. The state uses that term. It isn't super well defined. I don't know that we can super well define it. But what I proposed is that we do is, because some people were saying, well, like there's a bunch of flowers that I might want to grow that they're poisonous to eat. So we added that essentially the removal of poisonous or noxious weeds or brush that presents a harm to others. And so the idea being, I'll use giant hogweed as an example, right? If you let giant hogweed grow in your yard, all your neighbors are going to have it shortly. And if you're not familiar with giant hogweed, look it up. It's one of the most toxic plants there is. You touch it and your skin burns. So that's an example of no matter where that one is, it's presenting a hazard to others. Some of these flowers that are poisonous, if consumed, if they're growing in your garden, they're not presenting a risk to someone else. But to use another example, everybody tends to have, if you got wooded areas, you have poison ivy growing in your yard. We're not saying you have to go through and remove it all. But for instance, if you're living in a neighborhood and you allow poison ivy to flourish on your fence and it's all growing through into the neighbor's yard and presenting a hazard to their kids, then yes, we would be able to come in and say, you've got to clean that poison ivy up. So again, that it's not presenting a hazard to others. So that's what that clause is in there about. So with that preamble, I don't know if anybody else wishes to add anything, or do we want, otherwise we'll open it up for public comment. Okay, I know, go ahead, come on up. Again, introduce yourself and then give us your feedback.
Thank you very much for holding this hearing. My name is Julio Almada. I think it's a great idea to try to keep Henrietta looking beautiful. I think as homeowners here in the room, it's fair to say that we all want that. And so I thank you for putting that forward. I think, and it's good to hear that it's left ambiguous to some degree, the kinds of plants. It would be great to see a bill with more detail. That's one of the reservations that I had coming up here. Now, the other thing is the length of the grass when that trips a violation. 6 inches isn't as long as you think it is. I mean, for grass. I think it would probably be a more equitable measurement of maybe 10 inches. I think anyone here would, be reasonable to say that, geez, that needs to be cut. But 6 inches can happen overnight from something that you just cut a day or two beforehand. There's also no provisions regarding businesses, differentiating businesses and, let's say, senior citizens. So maybe some leniency in that regard. And I think the amount of the fine is kind of high. And that's it.
So just to address a couple things, 6 inches is what it is today. So we're not changing that. This wasn't proposing to change this. Again, this was predominant. It more had to do with the enforcement portion. In terms of the fine, I think is the lowest category in the state. The issue, one of the things, it was brought over from the code changed. I've always had a problem with every additional day is an additional penalty, and we've never done that since I've been town supervisor. I didn't realize it had carried over. I asked that it be struck. So that additional violation, it's additional violation every day. So it's just $100 to $250 for a one time. And to be honest, I don't know that we've ever done it more than 250, maybe for some of these problem repeat offenders, but it's almost always, it's just $100.
But it's on the books, and future governments could decide to be more.
Future governments could go in and change the code and up it to whatever
True,
they
fair
want to.
enough.
So
Thank you very much for your answer. Hey, Coach Page, how you doing?
Good. Fourth grade.
going up.
Hi, I'm Peter Collins, and I'd also like to thank you for having this hearing. And I certainly understand and agree with the intention of the law, or the way I understand the intention. I don't like trying to pull out and not being able to see what's coming in both directions and that kind of thing. But there are some things that concern me in the law. I was surprised, honestly, when I read it the first time, that I should say subdivision lots like mine, according to the law, are required to be 100% lawn, with some exceptions. That to me, that seems kind of behind the times at a time when many people are seeing advantages of other kinds of.
Can I just interject? That's not correct.
That's what it said in there.
It's basically, that's for all the lawn. If you read, it talks about an exception for a wildlife habitat.
Well, I said with some exceptions. Yeah, so.
Well, my point is, you just have to design one and build it. It's not like.
Well, I'll get to that.
Okay.
Okay. So I still think the 100% seems high. You know, I certainly accept that people have expectations of the front yards. I'm not quite sure why the middle of my backyard needs to be designated as lawn. It seems to me that something like the 50% closest to the street might be a way to go with that, but that's a thought. But then there are these exceptions. You know, there's lots of exceptions in there, and that certainly helped ease some of my concern when I started realizing that, you know, wooded areas and wetlands and cultivated gardens and wildlife habitats are exceptions. But then I started reading the town's code for wildlife habitat, chapter 289. And honestly, again, in a subdivision lot like mine, there's hardly any room for a wildlife habitat. They can't start any further forward than 50 feet behind the house. And then they can't be within 10 feet of the back lot line. They can't be within 4 feet of the side lot lines. Well, on my yard, there's not much room left by the time you do all of that. So if I want to have a wildflower meadow or something, it's going to be pretty tiny. So my suggestion would be, you know, because of these things, I'd love to have the town board send both this new law and the existing wildlife habitat law to, say, the sustainability committee, maybe the conservation committee, or even a separate committee that you set up, and let people look at these all together and make some suggestions and come back and suggest things. Thank you.
I will say one of the things, again, it was not our intention to reopen what I'll call a large can of worms, which of course will help the lawns. With this, we were trying to fix the problem that we're having from an enforceability standpoint. I don't have an issue doing that, but what I might want to take a look at is that we and again, we'll listen to some of this stuff and what we can introduce now. We may decide, I can't speak for the rest of the town board, but we may decide to introduce that. But for a significant change, my proposal would be that we implement it as modified, and you guys don't see all the modifications. I've told you a number of what's in there. But then we do what you said, go back and we can do a subsequent update. Now we'll just let E-Code 360, the guys who publish it, say, wait, it'll appear under new laws. We won't integrate it in until it's all done, because that's not going to be a fast process. That's going to be, a lot of input and feedback. And if you're talking about a significant change, then, like I said, this isn't really changing a whole lot of what's in there, other than it's increasing the number of exemptions. The only big difference in there is that front area, which you're actually technically supposed to keep that front area clear as is. Even if someone doesn't want, for most people, the front of their yard technically isn't even their own. It's typically in a right of way. And if the town wanted to come through and clear all the trees and take out all the bushes, the town could do that because it's technically their property. So, like I said, I understand what you're asking. I just don't know that I'm prepared to do that at this time, but I wouldn't have a problem doing what you're suggesting, where we send it out for review of the wildlife habitat, and the other stuff. I will say what you're seeing here today are probably, because of the way it's written, the folks who I will tell you, there'll be a march on town hall if we said, for instance, okay, let it go to 12 inches. There's a lot of people who do not want to see the grass grow that long. There's also a bunch of people who have the no mow May, right? So there are absolutely two camps with regards to this. So as with all stuff, it's going to be some kind of balancing act. I just don't know that I want the enforcement portion to wait while we're trying to figure out how to balance those two competing camps, for lack of a better way to put it.
Understood.
Yep. Thank you. Coming up.
How are you doing today?
Good.
Hello, testing.
Introduce yourself.
All right, my name is Tony. This is my first time ever doing this.
Could you give us your last name?
Oh, Tony Volo. I've been working here in Henrietta for the past 10 years. I live on the outside of town. I graduated from RIT for engineering a couple years ago. The one thing that I'm upset about what is going on with this is that there's less accountability for the town and larger businesses. There's many times I've seen sides of roads that have not actually been cleaned up, especially when you guys have the money and the ability to take care of it quickly.
What areas are you talking about?
There's some areas that I've seen very often, maybe like the bridge over on Jefferson Road.
That's New York State DOT.
Okay. Yep. So if you can enforce that in some way.
I don't have the
median-
authority. That's the
Okay.
difference.
Okay. So then they get something different. No, that's fine.
I understand. It
So-
frustrates us, believe me.
Yes. So do they have the control of it? Do they take care of it?
Yes.
So
Well,
there's-
let me rephrase that. They have control of it. Whether they take care of it's debatable.
Okay.
We do pressure them, now when it's regarding sight lines and safety, they are responsive.
That,
But when it's not, when it's like what, and one of the things they did on the bridge, because we kept complaining about the growth in there, they went and cleared the grass out. They essentially put down concrete. They got rid of the lawn in the center median because they were never maintaining it. I will say on the slopes of that hill, you wouldn't have that requirement to mow either, because if you look,
Yes.
it excludes anything that's a steep slope. So
yes.
because it's just tough to mow, right? But in terms of commercial, I will say that the majority of our fines and forced mowing that I see far more of them, it's being done on commercial sites than it is being done on residences.
Do they happen to pay more than like somebody who's a single homeowner?
They typically have to pay more because it typically requires more mowing. You know, again, it is not common that it happens to a homeowner. Typically what happens is the homeowner gets a notice. The homeowner that is the most common that gets the notice and actually gets the mowing are what I refer to as the absentee landlords. They have a rental property, they don't take care of it. Their tenants maybe in their lease are supposed to mow, the tenants don't mow, we send the notification. They might not have the most accurate address in there, or they're away, whatever, the days expired, the grass is now. Typically in the growing season, if you send the initial violation at 6 inches, by the time the 7 days have expired for the reinspection, you're closer to 12 inches by that point.
As a landlord, I've seen that happen
Yeah.
to me before.
And so, like I said, all the ones that I've seen, it tends to be more businesses than it does residences, other than, like I said, I'll say rental units. You know, occasionally we'll go out, we'll get somebody, we'll contact them. They'll say, you know, I had an unexpected death in the family and had to travel. I was in the hospital, whatever. They have discretion to be able to say, okay, I understand, we're going to extend the time. You know, one of the things I will say, if we do mow, we don't really have the ability to waive the mowing costs. If it's an out of pocket, we can't waive that, but we can waive any fines. Now, again, there are certain property owners that are repeat offenders.
I can attest to that as well.
Right. You're going to be hard pressed to find the town being relaxed for those individuals, but certainly for the people, you know, we understand stuff happens, right? Life happens. We get it. That's not what this is intended for. This is really with regards to the problem properties.
Yep. And then one thing to add, the median right outside of RIT on Jefferson Road, many times it hasn't been cleared of
That's
brush.
State road as well.
Okay. Yeah.
One of the things you're going to find, like all the potholes we move on subject potholes, 99% of them state roads. It is very frustrating.
So who can we contact about those
That's
issues?
Christopher Reeve. So again, New York State NYS DOT Region 4 contacts. Search that on the web. It'll come up, gives you the list, gives you their phone numbers, their names. Christopher Reeve is the acting director. Mike McCusker, I think is his name, is the maintenance. Also Scott Robinson. What is it? Dan McCusker. Sorry, Dan McCusker. But like I said, the names are on there. By all means, feel free to call them, and you know, if they want to have town crews cut them, we can work out a deal with them where they reimburse the town crews for going and mowing them. You know, we mow our traffic circles and the town roads and that type of stuff. You know, like I said, now we also have exemptions too. There's some areas that they're wetlands or wetland buffers, town land, we don't mow that. But you know, the areas where it's, especially if it's going to potentially provide a hindrance to visibility. So.
All right. Thank you. With that new information, I'd like to thank you for keeping up with the high standards that you set.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Naomi Pless. I live at 83 Cattaraugus Drive. I just have a few questions. It really sounds like the law is moving in a good direction, and I'm happy to hear that. Will there be another hearing then when the?
Correct. So
Okay.
this hearing as well will be open till for next meeting. So that the plan is to have the law updated back out to the town board next. Well, I want to have our stuff finished by Monday, whether the clerk has it all published and online Monday night, or whether it goes up first thing on Tuesday. It will then be published again, advertised for, and it'll be at the next town board meeting, two weeks from today.
I'm wondering if you could just speak at all to how fines get decided. There's that range of $100 to $250. Is there?
Ultimately, it is up to a judge.
Oh, okay.
So
it's-
typically we start at the minimum. We do the minimum. If the people pay it, done. If the people want to contest it, it goes to a judge. The judge can fine more, or I find it funny that they put a lower limit. I guess that's for us from the default, but the judge can actually reduce it below the minimum. I don't know that they can go above the maximum. I don't fully know all the, what a judge can or can't do, but ultimately a fine is levied by the judge.
Okay. And my last question, with respect to the noxious weeds, poisonous shrubs and weeds, is that, I mean, your description of it sounded perfect and nobody wants to, is there going to be more wording in the new version that sort of clarifies that somewhat? Yeah, you said there's going to be a.
The clause that it's not just that they have to clear poisonous or noxious weeds, it's ones that, I forgot what the exact phrase I used, but
Invasive?
that were harmful to others.
Mhm.
So my theory is if you want to have deadly nightshade in your garden and you want to run that risk, if it's in an area where it's really only you, that's your risk, that's your choice, right? If you live next to a playground and you've got it growing along the,
Right.
that's not okay, right? So
Yeah. No, I thought.
we specifically said, I wanted to specifically say that, has the potential for harm to others, right?
Okay. No, that seems very reasonable. Okay, so that's,
We'll take a look at what we'll do is this weekend, I'll do some searches to see if somebody has some good definitions.
mhm,
Most of what I've seen, they're variable. Now, one of the things we do, we might put in a list of one section of our code in another section, like it expressly from the wildlife habitat, it expressly excludes, you can't have giant hogweed. That's the only thing it lists that you can't have in the wildlife habitats. We can take a look at, I wouldn't want it to be a comprehensive list because we're never going to get it all right.
right, yeah.
But I certainly wouldn't have an issue with ones that we know.
Yeah, no,
what
I mean.
I'll call on the
listed-
banned list.
Yeah, I mean, you can say giant hogweed and other, plants that are known to cause damage to, yeah. I mean, I
Right.
think that seems reasonable. I just want to express support for the idea of putting together a committee to, develop future law that, looks more to protecting habitat for wildlife, for pollinators, and maybe opening that to anybody that's interested in the town and working on it. I'm certainly interested in working on it, but I'm less interested in being on a committee right now on
Right.
an ongoing basis. But I think that's a great idea, and I understand separating that from going forward with enforcement now.
Right. So one of the things that would be most likely under the guise of the Sustainability Committee, Pat Wardinger, who's sitting over here in the audience. Pat is the chair of that committee.
Mhm.
They absolutely welcome people who want to be involved and provide input on a specific subject. And so, I would say, Becky, do we have in our e-notify, do we have any ability for people to sign up with regards to a particular committee or anything like that? For, notification of,
For some of the bigger one, town board, planning board, zoning board.
Right.
But we don't have anything currently set up for sustainability committee. Not to say that we couldn't create such a thing, but we don't currently have that.
we'll take a look at that. In the meantime, what you can do is send it to me at supervisor@henrietta.org and I will put you in touch with Pat. And she can maintain that manually for now until we get something set up. So,
All right. Well, I just
Okay.
want to thank all of you for all of your work for the town and for supporting the town and keeping everything going. Thank you.
Steve, I think the local DEC in Avon could give us some guidance in that as well.
okay.
They're pretty good.
Coming up.
especially with wildlife habitat.
Thanks.
Oh, John, whoops, fumble.
My name is John Colagrosso. I live at 81 Long Branch Drive. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, my goodness. I'm going to state, not that I have a big excuse here, but I want to state anyhow that the first time that I saw this proposal was yesterday. And when I first read it, I glanced through it and I thought, well, I'm going to have a heart attack here. Because the first thing that I read was that Code 289, which is a habitat code, one of the important features of that code was being deleted, and that the jurisdiction of that code was going to be transferred to this new proposed code 148. And in reading 148, it looked like there were so many restrictions that if that were implemented, you would no longer really have a backyard habitat. So I didn't sleep last night. So I got up around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and I read this thing again. And towards the end, it says there are some exceptions and the backyard habitat code 289 is an exception. So the question I have, why do you delete the important part of 289, give it to 148, and then in 148, you declare that 289 is exempted from the provisions of 148?
So that's
What's
not,
the purpose?
that's not what it's doing. In 289, it says there was some line there about whereas the rest of the yard has to be maintained. It used to be under property maintenance. We've tried to pull all the lawn stuff together. And so it's just switching where it used to be under property maintenance. That was the intent.
No, 289, the specific, let me see if I can find it here. It refers to, here it is on page 1. About 3/4 of the way down, it says section 289-5 of the town code shall be revised to read as follows. Brush, grass, weeds, poisonous shrubs, and so forth will be maintained in accordance with 148. Well, that 289-5 states that if there is any conflict in any other codes, the provisions of 289 supersede all of the other codes. That was stricken, that in this proposal is stricken from code 289.
Is that correct, Don? That was never the intent.
This should say, this should add this as an additional sentence is really what it should be doing.
May I make a easy proposal? Just don't do anything to 289. Because you in effect here are not doing anything anyhow. You're taking it away, but giving it back.
No, well, again, there was yard purpose of the yeah, I'm not sure what that
Well, you can see the devastating effect that would have.
well, like I said, that wasn't the intent. And
Okay,
we specifically were calling out that this stands. I thought there was a mention in here. I think what it was supposed to change is what it was supposed to be switching is where it says, I think it was supposed to be updating 289-5, where it says that in the case of the defined above, case of conflict with other provisions of town codes, ordinance and regulations, including chapter 205, because we moved all the lawn stuff from 205 to here, I think it was supposed to be switching out 205 to this new code. That's what it was supposed to be doing.
Well, 205, I don't have a problem with, it was 289.
No. In 289-5, if you read what it says in the case of conflict with other provisions of the town code, ordinances or regulations, including chapter 205.
Oh, I see.
I think it was supposed to be replacing, including chapter 205,
Okay,
was supposed to replace that with whatever this new chapter is, 148. I think that's what it was supposed to do. If it was worded wrong, I apologize.
okay.
Again, I will be honest, when I was looking at my review of the stuff, I was looking at the stuff that I thought was the meat of the change. If there was an error or omission, I apologize for that. But that's what it was supposed to is. Do you agree, Don? That's what it was supposed to be doing?
Yeah, I think this needs to be revised.
Okay, so he will revise that. So
Okay.
and that's why, like I said, otherwise you're right. It creates a circular reference if we say this one's except.
You can do it, but no, you can't, or no, you
right.
can't. Yes,
The
you can.
intention was is to say that is an exception. The issue I have with and why we wanted to reference that there and put the exception is this gets in fact, one of the things we talked about is do we potentially make chapter 289 Don and I had talked about this. He felt it made sense to leave it as a standalone chapter. Do we make it a section of that other area? Because my issue is if you don't know 289 exists and you get into your lawns and in fact, I had somebody say to me, well, why can't I do a wildlife habitat? I said, you can. They said, it doesn't say anything about that in the code, in the property maintenance section, right?
Okay. I
It
see.
talks about how you have to mow your lawn and do all that stuff. It doesn't. And so that's why I wanted to make sure we expressly included that and listed it.
Okay,
But what it was supposed to be doing is switching that 205 reference, whether it just says, it could say including chapters 205 and 148. It's just making it clear that this, if I've got a wildlife habitat, that exempts it from the other maintenance.
Yeah, I
codes.
think it be made clear, but I think the reason why it's suggested the way that it is because this conflict provision would refer to chapter 148, and then chapter 148 exempts wildlife habitats. So I think that's how it's supposed to work, but I can understand your concern and we
Right.
can,
We'll work on
rephrase
that
it.
wording to
Okay.
rephrase it better.
okay. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I'm the one that actually drafted this 289. And my draft was quite different than what was actually
Yeah.
implemented. But I ran into the same problem that you're running into now with trying to define what is an obnoxious plant, what is a poisonous plant. There is no definition. So what I did to make it simple, since the state has the authority to declare plants to be obnoxious or poisonous or invasive and so forth, I just used them in the code rather than have Henrietta people trying to come up with some list and then have to maintain that
Right.
list. That's not really a doable thing.
That I agree with. Like I said, I don't have a problem with, there's ones that this is the difference between a list and a comprehensive list, right? There are certain ones that we know will always be on that list. Giant hogweed,
Because it's on the state list.
even if it's not on the state list. I
How
mean,
would- how would you otherwise prove it? How would you say that this plant is obnoxious and harmful, but this one isn't?
because when people touch giant hogweed, their skin
No, I thought we
burns.
weren't talking about giant hogweed.
No, I understand that. What I'm saying is, I don't have a problem having a list that includes some of those that we know will always be there. Right? But I would say that, I would certainly suggest that we reference the state list, because here it even says the way they did it. It doesn't sound like the previous administration, when they put this in, did it as you said. It never mentions the state list. It never mentions the state definition. What it says is it shows giant hogweed and says only plant material listed here is considered noxious. This list may be updated
Yeah,
from
okay.
time to time.
Yeah.
But my point is, again, poison ivy and poison sumac are examples that they're not bad. In other words, like I said, we're not saying you need to go out and get rid of them, but there are places where they are not good. So for instance, growing through into a playground would be a
I
bad
agree, but if
place.
it's in the center of your lot,
Who cares, right? I mean, I have an 8-acre wooded. I've got poison ivy all through there, and everyone will tell you every year I walk downwind from it and I end up with blisters, right?
Well,
But so like I said, that goes back to why we were talking about that. It's whether they present harm to others. But anyway, I do agree that we ought to look at, that we ought to reference the state
Okay.
list. And
All
so
right.
we can just say this list and any others included on the state list.
Okay.
I agree with you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, I'm sorry I got here late,
No problem.
so I missed what you had to say at the beginning. I'm Noreen Reardon and I live at 38 Sambury Drive. And I did email this list or this little bit to you, but I wanted everybody else to know about it too. My thoughts, it strikes me that this new law is an attempt to force uniformity with regard to the growing of turf grass throughout the town. Turf grass has often been referred to as green concrete because it has shallow roots that shed rather than absorb water. It is a monoculture that offers no benefit to the pollinators we rely on to help produce our food. Without pollinators, humans cannot exist. This law maintains its intent is to protect the health and safety of Henrietta residents, which if true would direct its efforts elsewhere. For example, outlawing the use of herbicides commonly used to maintain a weed-free lawn. It would also encourage residents to reduce the amount of lawn and replace it with native plants that would provide habitat for pollinators and birds. Section 148-8 lines D and E do just the opposite. Line F mandates the property be restricted to lawn 20 to 30 feet from the road, further restricting the use of the property to turf grass. Much of the language in the proposed law is vague and open to interpretation. For example, the proper use of land, plant growth, brush, grass, and vegetation, weeds, poisonous plants. What is the definition of rodents in this proposed law? And what's the definition of pests, excessive overgrowth, safe conditions, uniform appearance? This proposed new law is short-sighted, too broad, too open to interpretation, and too restrictive.
So I'm just going to let you know, since you missed that early part, none of that is new to this law. That's already in our town code. It's all in the town code. The majority thing that this law was addressing was the enforceability issues, some of which were created because of the changes in the judicial reforms and discovery laws and things like that. So a lot of that stuff was already in there. The requirement for that, as I mentioned earlier, the distance from the edge of road, it was originally at center line. We had talked about center line or edge of the right of way. Most people don't know where those are. So I said, let's move it to the edge of pavement. What I neglected to do was adjust the distance accordingly. So for a standard road, if I'm 30 feet from the center line, it's about 15 feet from the edge of pavement. In terms of typically, if you don't own that, in other words, if the town wanted to come in and clear out all trees, brush, and everything else from that, it's completely within our authority. Or if it's a county road, it's within the county's authority. If it's a state road, it's within the state authority. The issue just gets into that we wanted to have that residents should maintain that front of the property to keep good visibility. In terms of all the other stuff, again, that's already there today. The 6-inch requirement to mow the whole yard. They don't even make, other than that one section that John was just talking about with the wildlife habitat, that was really the only exception in there. There wasn't even an exception made for wetlands. In fact, we get residents who complain to us all the time that we should go back and mow behind the town property behind their house, even though it's a wetland buffer. One of the great things is I can now point it and say, no, we don't have to do that anymore. It just doesn't make sense. There are absolutely places where it doesn't make sense. There was no exemption for a large parcel. In theory, if you had an 8-acre lot under the old law, there was nothing that said you only had to maintain a portion of a law. Now, did the town ever enforce the full lawns? No, they did not. But I don't like where the practice doesn't match the code or vice versa. And so when we brought the stuff over for some of that stuff that was left vague and included the whole lawns, I wanted to bring over additional restrictions. There was nothing in there. So for instance, I'll use my house as an example. I live on the top of the hill. The road quickly dives. The land has probably a 45 to 50 degree slope. There is no way I can mow that. Now what I do is, because of people pulling out of driveways, every summer, a couple times a year, well, one time in spring, typically one time in summer, I go out there with hedge trimmers and I cut that back. And again, I always end up with blisters because there's poison sumac growing in there. But I cut that back because otherwise it hurts the visibility for drivers, and we don't have sidewalks. People walk on the shoulders. It will actually start to encroach. So I think that keeping that area clear as best you can is important. As we said, I don't know if you were here when it was brought forth, where I was saying that one of the things I'm all for, someone had made a suggestion, Peter made a suggestion that we basically bring it to the sustainability committee. They look at that, both this rule and can they, you know, and I'm sure John will want to be a part of it, look at increasing the ability for the wildlife habitat. I'm all for that. I don't want to do it right now, because what we're trying to address right now with this law is primarily the enforceability issue, because we're about to enter that season. And as you may have been here during the discussion about some of these problematic absentee landlords and business owners, that we want to make sure, one of the things that I get frustrated with is we have a violation, we cite them, and it's typically the businesses who afford the lawyers, and they then hit us with discovery. Oh, you didn't meet the 30/30 requirement for discovery. Judge, you need to dismiss this case. That is a waste of taxpayer dollars, right? I want to have the ability to, when they have those problems, to be able to continue to enforce it. I have zero issue with us taking time and reviewing the stuff that has been there since 2015. And actually some of that code goes back to, I think it was 1989. This has been in the town code for a long time. We're not changing that, other than we're increasing the amount of exemptions. But I don't have a problem with looking to do more. I just don't want to do it now because I don't want to hold up the prosecution. So again, what we would do is, so the question from John in the audience was, when would that be ready? So again, at next meeting, I want to have us resolve the stuff we've identified here, put that forth, get that in place to replace what is there today, because there's all this stuff is in there today, but it's even more vague and more loophole than what you're complaining about. Then what we would do is we would take it to both, I would suggest both the Conservation Committee and the Sustainability Committee, and they would start to solicit feedback and look at and make recommendations to the town board on how we can improve that code. If I had to guess, I mean, there's at least a 2-meeting process to get anything passed by town code. First meeting, you have to call for a public hearing. Second meeting, you have to have the public hearing. If there are no substantive changes to the law, then you can adopt it. Now, we've absolutely made substantive changes, which is why we're not adopting this today. But, you know, so again, if I had to guess, I know Pat, for one, is tireless and energetic and moves quickly. So if I had to guess, you're probably talking end of May, you know, maybe meeting in June would probably be the adoption. Right. So it just feels weird that it's getting close to May. It doesn't feel possible. Seems like just yesterday it was snowing. Oh, wait, it was. You know, but so like I said, so that gives you a time frame. I'm all for that. I just don't want to, that's something I don't want to rush, because as many of you as they're out there right now who are pushing for this, there are absolutely people who will get upset. And there were people who were upset by the wildlife habitat. Right. Right,
May
so,
I just finished my remarks and then I have
Absolutely.
a question for you.
sure,
Okay, the number of insects has declined worldwide by 60% precisely due to habitat destruction, much of which has been replaced by turf grass. There are 40 million acres of lawn in the United States. The maintenance of lawns is one of the major sources of pollution due to herbicide, fossil fuel, and water use. Yes, litter should be removed from all properties, vacant or not. Yes, invasive plants should be removed. Yes, plants that restrict sightlines on roadways may be hazardous and mitigation may be necessary. This proposed new law, however, oversteps and should be revised. So that shows you that I am suggesting revision. I'm not demanding anything be done right now. But I feel in the meantime, the language is so vague that if a neighbor has a grudge against another neighbor and this passes and it's in the media or whatever, it's in the town code, that they can say, hey, look, they've got this pest, I don't like that pest. Well, so what pest are we talking about? And in terms of poisonous plants, the ubiquitous yew that everybody has in front of their house is every part of that plant is poisonous. Burning bush is poisonous to humans. So they're everywhere. So the language is just too vague.
so again, that language exists in the code today, so if we don't pass this, people can do exactly what you just said they could do if this was in here. That doesn't change.
So what does change is the amount of money that can be and the
No.
amount of time.
No,
So what does change by this new law?
under the current code, the amount of fines didn't change, and actually I asked Don, Don and I talked earlier today, and I've already struck in the each day as a new violation.
Supervisor, mind if I jump in for a second here?
Go ahead.
Just to help. The current code, the supervisor said the stuff's already in the code. The current code on this issue is just several sentences. So I think what the supervisor is saying is the idea that ground cover and grass needs to be trimmed to 6 inches is already in the code. And the
Clean, safe, and condition and free from infestation, no noxious and plants, that's all in there. It's in there
there's a
today.
reference to noxious plants as well. Under the current code, the fine, I believe, is, I'm looking at it now. I think it's probably standard, but what I'm reading is a maximum fine of $1,000. That applies to a bunch of different things. It's in a chapter with all kinds of other issues, but it's lumped in with these other issues. And so that's where the fine is at. So the fine under the proposed code, as I understand it, looks to be lower. It also talks about imprisonment, which is standard,
Not to exceed 1 year.
which
Well,
is
so I guess what I'm
arguably same. So
asking-
just a second. So you asked what was changing. So I think those things are changing. And then one of the other things that the board is looking to do is to add in some clarity on exemptions. So right now it's pretty generic. But the town wanted to get in there things about wooded areas, wildlife habitats, which are to exempt, slopes, wetlands, conservation areas, and things like that. So I think part of this is just trying to take what's in there and using language, trying to add some clarifiers or some specificity. But, like you said, there are still some things that I think the town is looking to further clarify based on some of the feedback it's getting here.
It doesn't seem to me as though you're changing it enough that for your enforcement that you're talking about, that can't wait till after it's been
Oh, it
revised.
can't,
in
it
June.
does. It has to do with,
What exactly is the change that is such a rush to get changed?
it's the portion in there about the procedure for how we enforce it and bring it to law. So just let me read it today. Let me read this clause. You complained about the insects. Right now, in theory, under this code that exists today, 20513D, owners and operators shall be responsible for the extermination of insects, rodents, and other pests within their premises. So in theory, can't have any insects on your property at all today, according to the code today. So like I said, that stuff's in there today. It's
So
wrong.
that's being removed? The portion you just read is being removed?
That portion isn't being brought over there. We haven't, like I said, we're not touching all this stuff. There were some cases that pointed to some issues with regards to the enforceability of some of the lawn stuff. There was a case in Arundecoit, the wording that they had there, it stood up in court. And so we're bringing that language over because I don't want everybody's a copycat, right? And again, it's not the general homeowner, it's the person who has the attorneys. They're going to come in and they're going to say, oh, well, I'm going to fight this and I'm going to get thrown out on a technicality. That's what we're trying to clean up. Again, what we've got in there today, the penalty, the maximum penalty is $1,000 and imprisonment not to exceed 1 year. And each day's continued violation after notice of violation from the town of Henrietta shall constitute a separate and additional violation. So in 1 year's time, you could rack up $365,000 worth of charges and or 365 years imprisonment in theory, based on the vagueness of the code. That all needs to be corrected. In fact, I've started, I have a problem with our penalties for offenses all through the code. And I went through and amassed all of them and put them all into a spreadsheet and started to work on how we can fix all that. And then a whole bunch, then the pandemic hit and the stuff for new court, it gets pushed back off to the side. But the code needs, in that regards, needs a bunch of overhaul. We weren't looking to change that, although one of the things, as I said to Don, I had missed that the each day's continued violation was brought over. We did talk about for lawn, it's silly that it's up to $1,000 for lawn. That's silly. Some of this $1,000 is for some of the other property maintenance issues, and it's typically has to do with stuff that's more safety, but that gets into, right now, it's really vague. The other thing that typically happens too with a lot of these codes is there are 3 levels. So it's like the $100 to $250 for a first offense, $250 to $500 for a second offense, $700 to $1,000 for a third offense. This one doesn't have any of that. It just jumps straight to $1,000. That's the code as it stands today. That's problematic. Right now, again, we don't ever do that. Any of the lawn violations, it's $100 fine. I won't swear that we've not, for some of these chronic problematic offenders, scoff laws, that we haven't gone after a higher fine in court when we've had them in court. It's distinctly possible. I'm just not necessarily aware of them. But like I said, the code as it exists, everyone thinks we're adding code. We're not. I mean, we are, but my point is we're taking what's there today and we're moving it and we're trying to put it in one location, because that's one of the other things. Like, since I've been scrolling, the 6-inch restriction is in a different portion of the code than the parts I just read. You know, so it's hard to find. And then, as I said, there's no reference here to the wildlife habitat. So if you didn't know that section of code existed and you just came here to see what can I do with regards to my lawn, you might not know that I have that ability. I wanted to try to put that in one location. So somebody who wants to look at and say, well, what can I do with my lawn? It's all in one location. Is it perfect from day one? No, but it's better than what's in there today. This is an improvement over what's in there today. And I, again, have zero issue with us taking this out to both the Conservation Committee and the Sustainability Committee and saying, put together some recommendations on how we can improve the wildlife habitat. Because again, as John will tell you, when the previous administration put it in there, it was greatly dialed back from what he was pushing for. I don't know that you're going to get everything, because again, as much as you guys want this, there's other people who want the 100% manicured lawn, and it's going to be a balancing act, right?
Thank you for the opportunity to address you.
You bet. Thank you.
Kevin Yost, 1474 Middle Road. Good evening. When you say Conservation Committee, are you referring to the Town Conservation Board?
Conservation Board. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, and then the Sustainability Committee, I guess, is more or less a citizens committee, I think.
It's an ad hoc committee that we created with the intention that at some point it will become a standing committee.
Yes. Now, is that what it started?
or 3 years ago as a Zoom meeting of different citizens around the town and in fact, at the very last minute, I was able to get the link to County Legislator Uelson and he participated too and said he was submitting some sort of sustainability bill to the county legislators. Is that what you're referring to?
That
What
I
Mrs.
don't,
What Mrs. Wardinger chairs?
this is the committee that Mrs. Wardinger chairs. It grew out of the Color Henrietta Green grassroots movement. That's where it began. The Color Henrietta Green came to us about the idea of creating a sustainability committee. Like we did with our diversity committee, like we did with our ethics board. I basically, for the new committees, the ethic board was already established, but I challenged them to essentially create the new rules by which the standing committee would operate. For new committees, I encourage them to operate for a year or two as an ad hoc committee where it's not super well defined so that they can try different things and figure out what works best. Because it makes no sense to me to cast it, it's not in stone, but to cast it in code, go through all the process to create the code that establishes the standing committee, only to then have to modify it multiple times because, oh, well, what we did there didn't work. So by creating it as an ad hoc committee, they're not constrained by the code. They can try different stuff, figure out what works best. At the end of that, we're going to basically sit down and say, okay, that we've been operating for a couple of years now. Let's codify this. Let's make it a standing committee. So that's where it comes from. As far as the stuff at the county, I'm not sure what you're referring to. But that's where it came. More recently, we did something where as part of the Climate Smart Community Bronze certification, we had to have a specific task force. Thank you. A task force and a coordinator. So we basically made the sustainability committee the task force. And again, that may be in our code in the future that the sustainability committee is our task force and that the chair of the sustainability committee is our coordinator. But we just adopted, we've been doing those by resolutions. That's the difference between an ad hoc and a standing committee. Standing committees are put in code. Ad hoc committees are done through town board resolutions.
Yes, now starting in 2006, by then Councilman Uelson and Councilwoman Zink, but more Councilman Uelson after they had just gotten elected their second terms on a town board, that there was a greenery sustainability beautification group called Henrietta Pride. If maybe the sustainability committee could pick up on the greenery growing beautification aspects of where that group had left off. It unfortunately kind of went by the wayside, not criticizing any past town board members or anything, but
I appreciate that. Thank you. Any others? Do we have anything online, Becky?
None with their hands raised.
Anything any town board member wishes to add before we close this session of the public hearing? Okay, hearing nothing further, I'm going to close this session of the public hearing for the proposed local law to address brush, grass, and weeds. As stated, we will keep the, I guess, do we technically close it and we reopen it when we advertise? Either way, there'll be a public hearing at the next meeting because again, we're going to amend the law based on the feedback we received. Again, not to the extent that some people want, but there's a bunch of things we already addressed that we can amend right now. And I'm going to propose that we then put that forward. There'll be a public hearing for the law as amended. And then potentially we can enact it at the next meeting. Again, that's up to the town board. And then again, I have zero issues. In fact, I'm all for challenging the conservation board and the sustainability committee to review that and to make recommendations to the town board on what we can do in it wouldn't just be chapter 148 and chapter 295, also 205, because again, that prohibition against insects in the lawn. Your lawn's not going to do too well if there aren't any insects in it. Agriculture kind of needs insects. Plants need insects. People need insects. So it's a weird. Now, I think it was supposed to be insects that do harm, but again, where do you stop that, right? Bumblebees will do a lot of harm to me because as I've gotten older, I've become allergic to them. I carry around an EpiPen for just that reason. So to me, they're deadly, but I certainly wouldn't want to get rid of them. So, you know, that the code needs to be cleaned up. There's no question. That's not what we were trying to do here. So. Okay, thank you very much for everybody who took time out of your day to come and speak. Next up, we have a public hearing for the proposed expenditure of American Rescue Plan Act funds for the construction of a new town court. So when the ARPA first came out, there was one portion that was considered what's called revenue recovery. And it was basically for the loss in revenue that happened to municipalities due to the pandemic. And then there was another portion that was allocated for infrastructure. And so when that first came out, we went through and we looked at and said, you know, for the revenue recovery, we really need a new town court. We didn't know how we could pay for it without bonding. And when you go to bond, you increase the cost to the taxpayer. The ARPA was the perfect answer to that. We then took and allocated a bunch of the money towards certain improvements, water and sewer improvements. After that, I don't know if it was roughly a year later, they came out with a updated ruling on ARPA that said up to $10 million could be considered revenue recovery. And what that means, revenue recovery, there are restrictions, but far, far less restrictions than what are on the funds that are for infrastructure. In going to all the classes on what you have to do with this and all the rules you have to follow and all the paperwork and it's mind-boggling what the hoops you have to go through to get this stuff done. We decided that it makes much more sense rather than to do 5 projects as we'd originally laid out, that we do it all in one project and that we use other funds to do that infrastructure improvements. It's not exactly that simple because there's all kinds of rules with regards to infrastructure improvements, but we're working through those. But what made the most sense for us is to then put all of the funds towards all the ARPA funds towards the construction of the new town court, which then essentially that means there's $1 million less that we have to put in there from our unassigned fund balance, which then can again be used for those other projects. So that's what we're looking to do. One of the rules on this is we must hold a public hearing with how we're planning to use the funds and solicit input from residents. That's what this hearing is for. Is there anybody who wishes to give feedback on the use of ARPA funds? Is there anyone online? Okay, hearing none, then I'm going to close the public hearing for the proposed expenditure of the American Rescue Plan Act funds for the construction of a new town court. We were going to have a presentation by Jewel Assets for the Community Choice Aggregation Memorandum of Understanding. However, when they looked at some of the indicative pricing, the numbers were too high. And so their recommendations to all the participating towns, they basically set a benchmark as to where they wanted the negotiated utility pricing to come in below. They didn't come in below that. So their recommendation is that we not accept any of the responses from this RFP. There is another RFP going out in May. In addition to all the municipalities that were in the last one, of which included Henrietta, the city of Rochester is going to join in. So that brings additional buying power. They're also hoping that for whatever reason in April, March and April, the utility prices were what they thought were artificially high. They had spiked up. They don't know why. So again, it makes no sense if you're doing a locked in fixed contract, right? You don't buy high, you buy low, right? So their recommendation is that we not participate. Therefore, there will not be a memorandum of understanding. There will not be a presentation. But because we'd advertised, I left it on the agenda so I could tell you this. Is there anybody has any questions about the community choice aggregation? And hearing none, I guess I don't have, it's not a public hearing. It was a presentation.
Yeah.
I am going to complete the presentation for the community choice aggregation. Can I get my first resolution?
Oh, boy, hold on.
I'll give you time to go find it. So again, if anybody isn't familiar with community choice aggregation, right now, if you haven't made a choice of an energy supply company or an ESCO, RG&E makes the choice for you. What a community choice aggregation does is say, take everybody who hasn't made a choice and use that buying power to go out and try to negotiate good rates. That's what we're trying to do. But again, they're typical. And then what we're doing with that is we're looking at three products. One is a standard product, which typically only includes 10 to 20% renewables. Another is a 50% blended product. So 50% would be renewals, and another is 100% renewals. As I've stated, my personal belief, and again, I can't speak for the town board, but I tend to believe they're in a similar standpoint. Whereas I'd love to go to 100% sustainable, I'm not willing to do that if it's going to see a significant increase in the utility costs for our residents who haven't made a choice. I will note that anybody who has ever selected an ESCO, you're automatically opted out. When the time comes, anybody who wishes to opt out can opt out. People say, well, can you make it by default that you are opted out? No, we cannot. It's part of Public Service Commission law. It's the way it works. But like I said, we'll see where that goes from there.
All right, Mr. Supervisor, fellow town board members, I have resolution 9-159, 2023 to authorize and or ratify the following agreements executed between April 7th, 2023 and April 21st, 2023.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranik,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution number 9-160, 2023 to update the agreement for legal services.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranik,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz and fellow board members, I have resolution number 9-161, 2023 to authorize bills payable and any associated contracts or agreements for April 19th, 2023 through today, April 26th, 2023.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranik,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow town board members, I have resolution number 9-162/2023 to authorize utilizing the American Rescue Plan ARPA funds towards the construction of the Henrietta Town Court.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranik,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Fellow board members, I have resolution 9-163, 2023. To issue a home rule request to authorize the discontinuance and transfer of certain lands in Riverton for park purposes.
Second.
So this is, if you remember, this was originally on the agenda last meeting. There was an error found in the Assembly and Senate bills with regards to this. As part of the local waterfront revitalization plan, we're looking to build a river walk from Riverwood Tech Campus in the north, all the way down to the Lehigh Valley Diamond Branch Trail in the south. And basically, we need to get it past the golf course. The golf course goes right up to the edge of the river. It would put people at risk from being hit by golf balls if we had the walk go around. So we're looking to have it come around the east side of the golf course, but we didn't own that property. We worked a deal with the developer who is building houses there. And the areas you see in green are what we're getting. The area in red is what we're giving up. We're giving up roughly an acre to get roughly, so I think it's 0.9 acres is what we're giving up, and we're going to end up with roughly 2.5, 2.6 acres of land in exchange, including the path for that trail around the golf course. In addition, we will be getting an easement, an access easement. Now they're actually going to be building a road. So you'll still be, right now that's so we can get vehicles into the middle of the golf course from Erie Station Road. They're going to be building, I don't remember which one it was, Fairbairn, St. Andrews. It's named after one of the British golf courses. But anyways, there'll be a new road that will connect it. We have an access easement, so even before the road is dedicated, we'll be able to use it as for public use. And there will also be sidewalks there. So anybody there aren't a whole lot of people who walk down that trail, but for anybody who wants to walk down that access road, they'd still be able to get to it via sidewalk. So we don't lose any of the functionality, but what we gain is an ability to get our Riverwalk trail around the golf course. So it was a great solution. But because it's parkland, it has to go through the state parkland alienation process. Any questions, comments? Then hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranik,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor, fellow town board members, I have resolution 9-164, 2023 to accept amendment and change order number 1, modifying the energy performance contract with Centrica Business Solutions to allow work to start on town facilities prior to PSC approval of the streetlight buybacks.
Seconded.
So this is, again, part of the street light upgrades. In addition to the street lights, we were also upgrading the park lights, if you'll recall. The PSC approval takes a long time. Obviously, we're not going to can't do any street light work until we own it, which won't happen till after the PSC. And so that's how the contract was originally written. By removing that contingency upon the Public Service Commission, we basically modified it to pull that contingency out, but to make clear that until we get that PSC approval, we can only do work on the stuff that's owned by the town. So the lights that are in the park here, they're inefficient. They're they're in the field of play, which baffles me. So we're going to be moving the poles outside the field of play. We're going to put on new LED lights. There'll be smarter lights, so we'll be able to do more with them in terms of controlling brightness and more easily turning them on and off. So it's hugely beneficial to get that started this year rather than to or now, rather than to have to wait till after PSC approval, which could be late summer. So. Any questions? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution number 9-165, 2023. Whereas Janice Butts has donated $200 to the Henrietta Public Library for the purchase of large print materials, and whereas a check in the amount of $200 was received by the library director, therefore be it resolved that the Henrietta Town Board acknowledges this donation and thanks Janice Butts for her generosity.
Seconded.
Discussion?
Thank you very much. I actually have been taking out large print because I don't have to use my glasses, so.
Heading in that direction.
So I'm very appreciative.
And, Janice is, donates every year faithfully to the Henrietta Public Library. And, I think it's just a wonderful thing that it's, maybe something that, Janice gets to take advantage of, but also something that, is there and available for the entire community.
Agreed.
Agreed. Any further comment? Anything from the public? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz and fellow board members, I have resolution number 9-166, 2023. Whereas the Henrietta Public Library Friends and Foundation Incorporated has donated $1,550 to the Henrietta Public Library for crafting events, diverse programming, and the bike rodeo. And whereas a check in the amount of $1,550 was received by the library director, therefore it be resolved that the Henrietta Town Board acknowledges this donation and thanks Henrietta Public Library Friends and Foundation Incorporated for their generosity.
Second.
I'll just ask, what's a bike rodeo?
It's May 15th. And you go and you can donate old bikes and things like that for people. So it's
Oh,
at the
neat.
library.
Yeah, I think if the kids bring their bikes,
Yeah.
they can get a tune-up.
Oh, cool.
So there's usually people there that will help, and sometimes I don't know if this is the case, but sometimes they'll help size a bike and things like that to kids and show them how to appropriately wear their safety helmets and run them through their safety paces, their signaling. all
And
that
where
sort
do what happens with the donated bikes?
Typically, they get repaired and given out. I'm not sure which, there's a couple of places that take in old bikes,
Right.
repair them and then donate them to
Get them out in the
those who
community.
need. Yeah.
I ask because I've
great
got
thing.
2 bikes my kids have outgrown, and
Great.
during
place.
the pandemic, finding places that would take donations
They would not.
of bikes was difficult. So I'm excited that there's a place we can finally.
If they're larger
These get
size
to-
bikes in particular, those are often in demand because of.
These are like, I would get, like 10, 12-year-old,
Hmm.
maybe up to 14, somewhere
Yeah,
thereabouts.
yeah, because there's a lot of, I think that's a good age group too. But often, even adults are looking for bicycles, particularly if they have limited transportation options.
Great, thank you. I've heard the name and didn't know what a rodeo, like, of course, in my brain, I pictured kids riding around trying to rope each other on their bikes.
That would not be very.
No,
That's what
A
you
little
would.
dangerous.
well, that's that's what we did when we were kids.
Instead of a horse, you're roping a bike.
So, again, kudos to the Henrietta Public Library Friends and Foundation. They do a lot of great work for the library.
They really do. They have a lot of great events. They're very involved. It always amazes me that we get these continuous checks donated for different events. It just shows how hard they work.
Any further comments? Anything from the public? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz and fellow board members, I have resolution number 9-167/2023. Whereas the Henrietta Public Library Friends and Foundation Incorporated has donated $5,600 to the Henrietta Public Library for the Lynn Neal Memorial Pollinator Garden and related books for the collection. And whereas a check in the amount of $5,600 was received by the library director, therefore be it resolved that the Henrietta Town Board acknowledges this donation and thanks Henrietta Public Library Friends and Foundation Incorporated for their generosity.
Second. So this one makes me very happy and very sad. Very happy that we're going to have this memorial pollinator garden. Very sad that we have to have a memorial pollinator garden because we lost Lynn. All right, a little verklempt. Other comments?
I just think that this is, if it was me, this would be the way that I'd want to be remembered, is to have a beautiful garden and books in my memory. I think it's a
Absolutely.
beautiful thought.
Any further comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranik,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Fellow board members, I have resolution 9-168. Whereas Friends and Foundation of the Rochester Public Library Grant Fund has donated $14,744.12 to the Henrietta Public Library for the purchase of collection materials. And whereas a check in the amount of $14,744.12 was received by the library director, therefore be it resolved that the Henrietta Town Board acknowledges donation and thanks Friends and Foundation of the Rochester Public Library for their generosity.
Second.
Did I hear someone say that this is like an endowment, so it's gonna be?
I don't know. I was
Well,
gonna ask because I mean, the number is a little unusual, 14,744.12. So I that would be an interesting question.
I don't know if someone from the library is online and could answer that question.
Yes, I'm here. I can get you the exact information from Adrian, but it is an endowment fund.
Oh, fantastic. Is it going to be going towards anything specific or any particular types of collection?
I believe it's being shared among all the collections, but I know that Adrian has that written out and I can get it to you, or she can get it to you.
No problem. Thank you. We're just curiosity.
Any other questions, comments? Obviously, this is great and
Yes, this is
thank
fantastic.
whoever created the endowment that, so I assume this odd number is that it's based off of there's portion that gets doled out to a bunch of the municipal libraries.
Mhm.
I see a shaking of the head, a nodding of the head, so. All right, well, hearing no further comment, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranik,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor, fellow town board members, I have resolution 9-169, 2023. Whereas the Henrietta United Church of Christ, located at 1400 Lehigh Station Road, has donated $500 to the Town of Henrietta Recreation Department in support of the Neighbor to Neighbor Celebration of Cultures event on Saturday, May 13th, 2023. And whereas a check in the amount of $500 was received by the Director of Finance, therefore be it resolved that the Henrietta Town Board acknowledges this donation and thanks Henrietta United Church of Christ for their generosity.
Seconded.
Comments?
It's a great way to support the community, and personally, I'm very excited for this celebration of cultures that's coming up. And
Yep, and I'm just so impressed with the work that's gone into this and the partnership between the town and the school district as well to make this happen. Again, just a great celebration. There's so much planning has gone into this, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and the Henrietta United Church of Christ is one of the churches or temples, mosques that are involved in the Interfaith League and the Interracial Clergy Council. So that, they, in addition to the town and the school district, they've also been playing a big part in the planning of this, and in the execution of this. The diversity committee's been involved as well. So it's as is, I believe, the youth board and youth asset team. So, I mean, it's really going to be a wide effort, and it's to celebrate, the extremely varied cultural background of our town. We have just, such a large number of new Americans and people, from different ethnicities, different cultural origins. And, one of the things we've been talking about is how can we both celebrate that and get some of these folks more involved, because, they may not be used to American culture and not know what's out there and available for them. One of the things that we're going to have, in addition to food, so there'll be ethnic foods, there'll be cultural bands and entertainment, but we're also going to have information tables. So we've been inviting a whole bunch of support service folks to have information tables there. The school district and the town has been working together to create a information packet that helps people who are new to America, that may not understand how to go about doing things as easy as, like, how do I call the police? How do I report, an incident? How do I pay my taxes? How do I, on and on. So they basically worked with especially folks who for whom English is a non-native language. And they basically have been putting together the list of some of those questions, and then we're translating it into a number of the languages that are spoken throughout our town. So this is part of a larger effort, again, to both celebrate and welcome the people from the different cultures across our community. So huge props to all the people involved. Far too many to list tonight. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranik,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Blanca,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution number 9-170, 2023, to authorize the purchase of a Ninja rig for the Recreation Department from Deary's Gymnastics Supply.
Seconded.
Questions, comments?
Well, having a tiny American Ninja in my house, I think this is great. And I'm sure that the kids in Henrietta will enjoy this for years to come.
I know there's a lot of kids very excited about. Can't wait till this arrives.
Mhm.
And again, huge props to our gymnastic team, and especially our director, Jackie Kiddo, and all the work they do there. Hands down, one of the best programs around. Any further comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranik,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Blanca,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz and fellow board members, I have resolution number 9-171, 2023, to authorize the town to apply the excess unassigned fund balance for calendar year 2022.
Second.
So, as per our fund balance, the range that we're supposed to have the ending balance in, and this is the combined balance of general, highway, and library funds, is from about 9.4 million is the so the higher 25%, we would have to allocate, or if we go down to the 19 lower percent, we would have to allocate 12.2 million. The proposal, as we've discussed in the past, we were going to keep it closer to the 25% number. There was a last minute update for this, so if you didn't see it come through, look it over. And that was just, Linda had caught that last meeting, we had approved the assignment of some of the fund balance already to be used for improvements. So we needed to include that number. In the first version of this resolution, there was some small amounts added to the park capital projects in order to get, because we were looking to allocate about 9.4 million. We had to get above the 9,415 number. So there was something like $15,900 that we added to the capital projects just to be above that number. With the stuff that we had already approved at the last meeting, we didn't need that number, so I rounded it back down to the 1.5 million. So but that's really the only change. Like I said, we forgot that we had already assigned somebody on a unassigned fund balance. So any questions? As we talked about 4.5 is basically roughly the same amount we did last year is going to be applied to the 2024 budget to minimize tax increases. 2.1 million is going to the construction of the new town court. 1.5 would be applied to town park capital projects. So that includes the new sport courts, that includes the golf course, as well as a number of other projects. And then we've talked about creating an equipment capital reserve fund to level out the buying of some of these very expensive vehicles. We would buy them out of the capital reserve fund rather than always just suddenly jack the budget up for that year to account for the purchase. So any further questions, comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranik,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution number 9-172/2023 to authorize funding a portion of the sports court project for the monies appropriated in the 2023 adopted budget.
Second. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranik,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Fellow board members, I have resolution 9-173, 2023 to adopt the amended petty cash policy to include additional cash on hand for golf course and driving range events and operations.
Second.
The description pretty much says it all.
Mm.
Any further questions?
So it's a done thing.
Well, it's not closed yet,
Aha.
but we're basically getting ready. So
Okay.
if we continues to move down that path, our first event will be an event that was already booked, hadn't been paid for yet. It's with the U of R, who is going to hold a golf tournament. And that is the first weekend in May, and we would be open for golf after that. So included on the next resolution is the hiring of a golf course superintendent. It's all still moving forward. We do have the signed and executed access and rental agreement. We're still trying to get towards closing. The town's attorney and the seller's attorney were having some discussions, and I've got to meet with them to hopefully get that signed and done.
I also believe that the course is open to the public after that event on May 8th.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, including that day, because the event's in the
Including
morning.
that day.
Yeah. So Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranik,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor, fellow town board members, I have resolution 9-174, 2023 to hire personnel and make the attached changes.
Seconded.
Any discussion?
No.
Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranik,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. That concludes our resolutions. Do we have any discussion items or comments from the public? Coming up?
Yes, Kevin Yost, again, 1474 Middle Road. I speak not only as a resident of the town of Henrietta, taxpayer, but also as Monroe County co-chair of the statewide group Divide New York. Within the past month, the Honey Falls Lima Mendon Sentinel free, actually it's not free, you have to subscribe to it. They're one of their weekly editions front page. The owner and publisher, Mr. Chris Carosa, at a front page article where Supervisor Schultz and two other municipal leaders in upstate, presumably the other two were from upstate anyway, either way, outside New York City, which dominates the state. A virtual panel discussion published in there, and Supervisor Schultz complains rightfully so how New York, how the state government in New York City based and totally dominated, makes the mistake of painting the rest of the state with the same brush, and especially in this case being discussed was the state budget. And what we're pushing for in Divide New York is for the state to still remain one state, but divided into three autonomous regions: New York City, and then Montauk, which would consist of the two counties immediately north of New York City, Rockland and Westchester, and then two counties immediately east of the city on Long Island, Nassau and Suffolk. And then the rest of the state, upstate, would be called New Amsterdam. And the regions could veto certain legislation by a state legislator, or that would negatively impact their respective region. I'm not sure. Anyway, it would remain one state, but three separate autonomous regions within one state. And especially when it came to the state budget and allocations of funds. Supervisor Schultz was mentioning in the panel discussion. Right now, the bill's come up in the legislature. I don't think it's ever made out of the committee of either house of the legislature. Right now, it's in the judiciary committee of the state senate, and the bill's number is S3093, and it's not been assigned a number or committee assignment in the assembly at present. And the sponsor, who's a member of I believe is a member of the Judiciary Committee, is Senator Pam Helming, whose district abuts us. She now knew in the new apportionment, she now covers Rush, which is boundaries, informs our entire southern boundary, and she probably, I'm sure, has to also cover Mendon, which is on our southeast boundary, Williams Road. I'm not sure if Pittsford's in her district or our senator, new Senator Jeremy Cooney's district. I'd like to see the town board
pass a resolution to support this bill in the state legislature. I know several months ago, I came to a town board meeting and passed out a packet of different information I printed out from either both our emails that came to the chairs and members, or if not, our website itself. I'd like to see this town board pass a resolution supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Is there anyone with any questions for Kevin or? Okay. Anybody else? Public comments? Do we have any committee or miscellaneous reports from the board?
So let me correct what I told you about the bike rodeo. The bike rodeo is on May 13th between 10:30 to 12:30 at the library. It's a fun, free event for bikers of all ages and abilities. Bring your bike and your friends. Western New York Bike Racing Club will be available for free bike tire inflation and small repairs. Injury-Free Coalition for Kids of Rochester will provide bike helmet safety checks. An outdoor obstacle course for young riders. Our Community Bikes, a local nonprofit located in the city of Rochester, will be collecting bike donations for riders in need. There's going to be crafts, fun, trail maps, and more. And the event is outside, so please dress for the weather, because we all know in Rochester, we never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, when they were paving the new sport court the other day, they were within one truck of completion and the hail started to come down, which
Came down, too.
immediately,
I
yeah.
missed it. I was in a bill. Was I here doing bills? I don't know. I missed it. And I got home and got out of my car and I'm like, what is all the white stuff all over my
Right.
yard?
That's funny.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well, let me tell you something, way back in 1989, the first weekend of 1989, Saturday, sunny, 7 degrees, the next. And then we were supposed to have a crowd walk around town, when they went around town at that time, the next day, Sunday, but then the phone rang in the middle of the night and I was 14 and my father worked the highway department, was a wingman and mom said my dad, Paul, go to work, and like, that's strange, and I rolled over, went back to sleep, and I got up in the morning, and I was supposed to have a crop walk, look out the window, saw a blizzard. I fell over, my hair was almost stinging, and my whole body either fell over or must have levitated up and hit my head at the ceiling. I was shocked.
absolutely. Other announcements?
That's all I have. I just wanted to make sure I corrected my bike rodeo that I was ill prepared to answer those questions about.
No problem. You were more prepared than I, because like I said, my picture of a rodeo is the
Kids with
hijinks,
ropes.
the hijinks we used to do as kids, so. Did you have anything, Rick?
No, I attended a school board meeting last night. They went over their 3 and 5 year plans for our capital projects. As the buildings are built between the 58 and 70 and, they're all 50, 60, 70 years old, but really well maintained. But it was a long meeting, but it was interesting. Also, our Health and Safety Coalition is going to be having a table at the May 13th event. Yep.
Right.
Fantastic.
Yeah, nothing upcoming that I haven't said into the record, but did want to also give credits to the fantastic job that the youth board did in having our Hall of Fame ceremony on Sunday. Just a fantastic celebration of truly phenomenal kids.
Truly was. I mean, they always go above and beyond. It's such a great recognition. 26 students every year is just incredible. Congratulations to everybody again.
What's also refreshing for me is it's always so pleasing to attend something that's positive. Our
Yes.
whole life is built around negatives and divisions and all that kind of stuff. And it's just a wonderful celebration of the good things in our youth.
Agreed. Hearing no further comments, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.